What if your podcast isn't supposed to just simply grow an audience, but it's just designed to be your business asset? My podcast friends, content creator friends, this is the episode for you, the one you've been waiting for and asking me about all the time. This is your moment. Today's guest is a digital marketing strategist, the author of Podcasting for Business, and co-founder of a podcast production agency specializing in making shows like yours profitable, small businesses, coaches, consultants, and all kind of marketing networks. Please welcome Megan Dougherty to the show. Megan, I'm so glad to have you here.
Mr. Yu, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me. And I'm so excited to hear that you've got an audience of creators. I cannot wait for this conversation.
Same here. Hopefully they're not all at work, but whether they're on live or replay, I'm going to get as much information as I can get from you to kind of help them do the thing they've been trying to do for a long time, for years now, turn their podcast into a viable business asset. So
yeah,
to help out with that. But thank you for doing that. First off, let's just kind of jump into a bit of your background in this. If you can give me that briefly. How did you get to the place where you're able to help podcasters and content creators like myself do this? What's that look like?
Well, yeah, I never actually set out to be a podcast producer. I didn't have a plan that, I'm going to get into this industry and I'm going to do it. But my background, as you mentioned, is in digital marketing, online business development, all of that good stuff. And then a former colleague reached out to me one day, almost 10 years ago now, and said, "Hey, do you want to start a business together?" And I said, "Well, with you, Audra, I'd love to." Her background was in broadcast audio. She worked on the radio in Dallas and other places. And so we put our skills together, digital marketing and, that sound engineering and storytelling. And we started producing podcasts for businesses back in 2017. And over the last, 9 years, we have done so much research and worked on so many different shows and experimented with so many different types of podcasting that it has over time really developed into some, I think, fairly earned expertise in the industry.
I love it. That sounds like you have at least some kind of experience in doing this. Well, let's go ahead and jump in, because I want to get as many questions in as possible. We're not rushing. This is what I would call a special episode, because it's a special topic, so you get more time than most of my guests normally get. So
I love it.
No rush. You don't have to speed through the answers or anything. Let's kind of work through it. But one of the things that I see people do, people I know, hopefully don't think I'm pointing them out today. I'm not on purpose, but they want podcasts because they want more visibility. They want more followers and downloads. They want all the things that I guess you're supposed to want.
Yeah.
What's the biggest mistake that businesses are making when they approach podcasting from that kind of strategy, and just being a media face to instead of a viable business strategy, if that makes sense?
Yes, there's a couple of different contexts that can come from, right? So the first one is if you already have a business, if you sell something, if you sell coaching or if you sell products of some kind, if you're in e-commerce, your podcast doesn't need to become a new business in and of itself. It needs to support the business you already have. So a lot of business owners, they make a mistake thinking, I'm starting a podcast, I've got to build a big audience and monetize via ads and get sponsors, and that's how a podcast needs to be. But if you've already got a business, if you've got coaching clients, if you've got work that you're already charging people money for, the podcast should be helping you do that more effectively. And that's how you're going to make the biggest return on having a podcast. Now, on the other hand, if you're starting a podcast and you are trying to build a media platform and turn that into a business, that's kind of a different game. And so that's when, growing your reach and growing your visibility and growing your authority, that is going to be a lot more important, because it's that audience and the connection that you have with them that you're ultimately going to monetize. So there are really different strategies to approach podcasting from, and knowing which one you're going to pick is going to save you a lot of time and a lot of hassle.
No, absolutely. That sounds great. We hear from so many gurus who are kind of trying to tell us how to make our podcast profitable. Sometimes it can be dizzying and nauseating, to use two phrases. Your book is called Podcasting for Business, How to Create a Show That Makes a Bottom Line Difference for Your Company. What do you think, Megan, separates a podcast that's simply popular from one that's genuinely profitable? What do you think about that?
It's whether or not you make money. Would be the biggest difference.
Okay. All right. But, can you stress that out some more for us?
Yeah, let me be a little more clear about that. So a profitable podcast is one that achieves specific business outcomes. And those can look really different depending on the type of business that you have or the type of goals that you have. So if some people podcast as a way to build their network so that they can get more referral partners, so that they can be more well-known in their industry, so that they can be like the guy who knows everybody. That's a really a metric that you can get with podcasting that can make your business very successful because it's who you know. Your podcast can be the tool that you use to get to know people. So that's one type of successful podcast. Another one, it might be, let's say you had an online community. It's a paid membership community and you're trying to grow your membership in that. Well, then your podcast can be a perk of membership. People get interviewed once they're members, or you can refer to things that are happening in the group on your show so that the wider audience gets a sense of, oh, hey, there's really cool stuff happening here. Or you could have bonus content from your podcast to give to your community. And that could be another type of successful use of a podcast. It really comes down to, what makes your business successful, or what makes a business successful, and how can the podcast help you do that more? And that, it requires a little outside the box thinking, because often that means treating a podcast not like a podcast, but like a tool that you're designing to do something for you. You can do whatever you want with your show. But the trick to making it successful is knowing what you want and knowing whether or not you're achieving it, so that you don't spend, forever chasing your tail around, hoping that you're going to get an outcome that you haven't really clearly defined.
I like that. I hope I can go back to that last point, hopefully. But let's kind of just start with the business approach. Because there are a lot of folks that, I guess, the long game is that their podcast is going to become a business. You want to see it monetizable. There are people out here who are monetizing their podcasts. Our podcasts are monetized. They may not be the same as other folks. They may not be having the kind of level of monetization, but it kind of varies. So if I said to you, Megan, I want to start a podcast for my business, what are the first 3 questions that you would ask me before we even recommend getting recording equipment, before we decide to get a format, get a room or a closet to record in, before any of that stuff happens? What's the first 3 questions that you would ask me or somebody who's a designer to start a podcast as a business or for their business? Who would you ask them first? First 3 questions.
First thing I'd ask is, what are you hoping to achieve with your business in the next 1 to 2 years? What are the things? Are you hoping to get a bunch of new clients? Are you hoping to build a new income stream? Are you hoping to reach a certain number of people? Because that's going to impact the way that you design and market your show. The next thing I'd ask was, who do you know who's doing this in your space? You don't want to copy anybody and you don't want to be scared away by competition, but it's a good idea to get the lay of the land. What does a good, professional, effective podcast look and sound like in your space? That's going to give you a lot of information about where you should be investing your time and your budget. So if you're in an industry where there's a lot of really polished shows with really fancy editing, you don't want to be the worst one. Right. So you're going to have to plan to be able to kind of sit at the table that you want to be eating at. And then the third question I think I'd ask is, what's the timeline on which I need this to work? And what are kind of the little, the smaller milestones in between my ultimate goal and where I am now that I can be working towards? Because, becoming a famous top 100 podcaster who's actually making a living from just their podcast, that's a big goal. So maybe we start slower. It's okay. Let's earn $1,000 with the podcast. How are we going to get to that? And once you can do that, it doesn't have to scale right away. Make it work and then make it better. So that's kind of where I would start that discussion.
I like that. Is there anything, and this is, I have friends that are pondering starting a podcast, but haven't pulled the trigger yet. Varying reasons for that we won't get into live here on the air. What would make you tell somebody not to start a podcast? What kind of signs or indicators would you see that say, you know what, you shouldn't be doing this right now or ever?
Well, okay. So one is if you're just starting a brand new business, aside from the podcast, if you're just setting up a new practice, or if you're doing a brick and mortar or anything, give yourself a year or 2 to get settled with actually running your business before you start a podcast, because the podcast is going to take some time and it's going to take, but get your feet into your business so that you have a little extra bandwidth and brain space to actually focus on the show. And another thing is, if you're not everybody likes it. A lot of people think, oh, I should have a podcast. It's going to be great. But then, you start podcasting and you're like, actually, now that I've started this, and that's the grind of doing it week to week and the post-production and having to manage editors and all this stuff, you might hate it. It's a possibility. So a nice thing to do is to be a guest on other shows first. And you can also start with a season, commit to a smaller, shorter term project rather than, committing to every Tuesday or every Wednesday for the rest of time. Do 12 episodes. And see how you like that. And if it works well, if people respond to it, amazing, you've proved the concept. And now you've got a lot more information about how the experience is going to be. Because some people don't actually like it. You know, there's survivorship bias. All the podcasts you see of people out there, there are people who enjoy doing it, but not every show that started was done by somebody who liked it. And that's really important.
That's the truth.
Yeah. So, and I think the last thing for you need to be able to wait for results. Podcasting is not a short-term strategy for the most part. Like, you can see some results quickly, particularly if you're taking a relationship building strategy and you're really looking to like build a network. That's going to happen pretty much right away. But for most other goals, especially financial ones, it's going to take time, and you need to be able to comfortably survive that time as a person and a business owner before you start seeing a return on your investment. And so if you can't, if the reality is that you need to be making income now, you just need to be spending on your time on the phone selling things. It's not a fun truth, but the reality is you're going to spend a lot of time and some money before you start seeing any back.
That's really good stuff. We'll be bouncing around. Like I told you, this is the gauntlet. So
let's go.
No rhyme or reason for the questions. I'm just throwing them at you because I'm asking everything that's been asked of me, that I've asked myself. More that have been asked of me. I get a lot of questions about podcasting and turning it into a profitable business. So I want to try to get as much as I can for you. Thank you for your patience with all of this.
Oh, are you kidding? Q&A is actually my favorite thing. This is like the best way this conversation could have gone.
You're gonna love this. Batten down the hatches. We got more to go. Right, so let's say this: that I have a podcast, or a friend of mine has a podcast that has 10,000 downloads an episode, but none of those listeners are becoming customers. Another entrepreneur has 300 listeners, and 5 of them become clients. Which one of those had the better podcast, and why do you think? Which one had the better podcast of the two?
If the goal of the podcast was to support a business and make money, then the one who got the 5 clients is the better podcast. If the goal is for reach and audience, then the one with 10,000 listens is the one. So it may be that, you know, you start a podcast because you've got a really important message to share, and the most important thing is that people hear you and connect with you, and maybe are part of your network on social to help promote your message. And if the show is doing that, that's good. If you're trying to generate income, like bottom line balance sheet revenue, then fewer downloads and more money is absolutely the success.
I like it. I know a lot of friends who probably don't have a 10,000 listener problem. But
10,000 is great. If you've got problems and 10,000 downloaders, that's a high quality problem. We can fix that. We don't all live in that world, but it's all good. It's all good. All right. So from your experience and what you've seen, what would you say is one of the biggest mistakes that people who have the podcast and want to branch out into the business realm with it, or use it as an avenue for that? What's the biggest mistake that they make that you noticed? What's the biggest thing you've seen? Going for marketplace or like AdSense level sponsorship. So especially a newer
Explain
show.
That more.
Yeah, so when you have a podcast on, say, like Apple or Spotify or on YouTube, there's monetization programs that you can join. So there's, you know, on YouTube you can have you've got your ad spots, and they get monetized after a certain number of views, and YouTube will put ads in there even if they don't pay you, because thanks YouTube. But in the audio platforms like Spotify and Apple, you can put little ad markers in your show, and you can sign up to have ads play on those based on certain categories, and you'll get paid what's called a CPM, or cost per mil. So it's a fee per 1,000 downloads. And that's kind of the most traditional way that sponsorships get paid. So it's like, say, when you're listening to a podcast that you like, and it's like, and now here's a message from our sponsor, BetterHelp. And they talk about, like, get the ad read. Those are dynamically inserted through a marketplace. There usually wasn't a like personal arrangement that was made between the host and the network. So that's just marketplace ads. And if you've got tens of thousands of downloads every single month, that can be a decent way to make some money. But for a smaller show, you're usually going to get a much better sponsorship or monetization deal if you arrange it personally outside of the marketplace systems. And so that would be, I'm the podcaster and I go to the Acme Corporation and I say, hey, my audience would totally love your stuff. Let's do a sponsorship. I'll play your ad for a month. I'll interview one of your members. I'll send an email about it. I'll put 2 posts on socials. All of these things together create a sponsorship package that's much more valuable than just the airtime. And so that can be a much higher deal value when you negotiate. We call it sweetheart sponsors for newer shows. It's somebody who knows you and likes you, and you can negotiate a much higher rate for your audience than you would be able to through the traditional marketplace system. And that because you've got not just your podcast itself, the video or the audio, but you've also got your email and your socials and the other things that you can do, and that can really increase the deal value. So for monetization, I think a mistake is for a smaller show starting with the marketplace ads. But and I think the other one is, if you have a business where you have products or services that you can sell, save the airtime for yourself. That's valuable real estate. And as somebody's listening to you, do you really want to sell it for like for $25? When somebody could listen to that and buy your $97 a month course, right?
Sure.
So really make the judgment, is the airtime worth sharing? For a lot of business owners, I think it's not. And that they're going to do better. Maybe if you want to network with someone, say, hey, I'm going to use my ad space to promote your products or your book because I like you and we're going to become better friends by doing that. Really think about the inventory of your podcast and all the different areas that you have to sell as things that can be valuable either to yourself as the business owner or to your partners and colleagues, people that you network with and are building relationships or referral partnerships with. And I'd say looking at outside funding until you're at that, it's really compelling kind of bigger money. I think it's usually better to try and do it yourself.
That makes a lot of sense. I want to ask what I would call the 80-20 question. Now, Pareto principle, it's in everything. But in regards to, say, a podcast is they are attached to a business, or they would like their podcast to become marketable on that front. I have some friends that speak about some really tough issues, but they want to branch out to creating a website and kind of branching into that, start doing books and apparel. It seems to be the most common thing that I hear about the most. How much of a podcast should be promotional? You just mentioned how, a small podcast probably shouldn't go too heavy into the marketplace because, they probably will spend more than they'll get back, as one of many reasons. But how much of that should be promotional when somebody's trying to accomplish a podcast business from that end? Is there any level of it that should be promotional at all? Or do you advise against it completely? Is there a balance? How do you feel about that?
It's a balance. So there's a couple of things that are true at the same time. One thing that's true is podcast ads work. They work. People remember the brands that they hear about. They often take action based on them. The other thing that's true is they hate them. Nobody actually likes podcast ads.
Well, the truth comes out.
It's true. That's the thing. Like, I think a lot of listeners understand a couple of ads are the price that you pay for this content that you enjoy, and that's fair. But you don't want to overdo it because your relationship with your audience is the most important thing ultimately. In terms of the growth of your show, in terms of potential monetization, what you're actually selling is access to an audience that trusts you and trusts your opinions. So protecting that reputation, the reputation you have with your listeners, is of paramount importance. That said, you have stuff, you have a business, you have a platform, you have a brand. It's your show. You're allowed to mention it. So for, say, a typical 30-minute podcast, I think you get 3, in my opinion. You can have a little welcome of something kind of easy after you say, welcome to the show. Hey, don't forget my book's coming out next month. Go grab it. Nice, easy, friendly, informational, not a huge ask. Maybe towards the middle of the podcast, you stop and you have maybe a sponsor read or something a little more intense. It's like, there's this great program that a friend of mine is running right now. You should really check it out. I negotiated you a great discount. Here's a link. Go check it out when you have a minute. And then at the end, totally fair to say, hey, follow me on social. I'm posting extra stuff there all the time. It's great. I'd love to connect with you there. It's very friendly, very natural. You're sharing 3 different things that are really useful, but it's not overblown. It's not too much, and it's not buy my stuff, which nobody actually likes.
Oh my goodness. All right. So much more to get into. All right. So there's so many questions. I'm like, where do I go with this? It's just so much. Well, I guess one thing I want to ask you is, when you talk about that, which is a small podcast, I mean, I don't really feel like we're a large podcast. I think we do decently for what we're doing. There's a lot of things people may recommend. Oh, you need to do this. My email inbox says, a lot of folks feel that way. I should be doing this, and the third. I'm like, you know what? I could do it, but I don't want to pay you, and you. So it's a lot. But I think we have value in what we're doing. But at the same time, I don't think about podcast ads as much. I don't think about injecting it in there. I'm not going to say it doesn't have value. I even going to say it can't help. I kind of feel like there has to be a horse before the cart. What I mean by that is that I feel like the show should be at a certain place in its following that would justify me taking that step. Is there a number in your mind with you and your agency where you feel like, you know what, when you talk to somebody who's a prospective podcaster, content creator and such, that, you know, when you hear that number, you know this person is probably a viable candidate to start adding ads and mid-show transitions and things like that, and voiceovers and all those things that are offered to us so much in that world, but we just, you know, a lot of folks just can't pull a trigger on it financially, or sometimes they get ahead of themselves and it doesn't make sense because they don't have a true following. Is there a number that you guys look for? Like, you know, if they had this much listenership, it makes sense, or does the number not matter?
What I think I may not be entirely clear on what kind of services you're being offered, but it sounds like there could be some chicanery afoot.
Well, I with that. I don't want to disparage everybody that sends me emails. It's not all bad. Some of it just not timely from a financial perspective. Some maybe say, you know what, I can help you market your show, do all the social media for you, which I'd love because I hate social media for the most part. So I would love those things being done for me, scheduling appointments. Those things all sound great. Some offer things such as, you know, I help you out with getting your podcast viewed in more places and spaces and increase your viewer numbers on your videos and your shorts on YouTube, that kind of thing. I used to get a lot of the things I was mentioning about, you know, just people who want to help you enhance your podcast, get ads and have ads added to the show, to get sponsorship is the big word that we hear all the time. Did that help out a little bit? That's kind of where
it does. Yeah, no, I understand now. And thank you for the extra information, and very well done. Not disparaging anybody in particular. That was elegant.
Yeah. No need to do that.
So,
they know who they are.
Yeah. So I think it really depends on the resources that you're starting with and how much available time you have. So I think, you know, in terms of like saying like little CTAs in your show, hey, follow me here, check out this cool resource, or I'm launching something, that's personal, it's legitimate. You'd say the same thing at a networking event. And I think those are okay to include at any level. You should always have a little CTA of like, hey, here's where you can follow me and do the next thing. In terms of getting support from podcast service providers, and there are so many, and so many of them are not legitimate, that really, if you've got a business, like say you, social media was a great example. Someone's trying to share your show on social media. Yes, that is a popular way for shows to grow. If you have a social media agency that you already work with in other areas of your business, cool, have them work on the show as well. Or if you know that you're getting good traction from social media, and that the work that you're doing on social media, if you can see that that's having a result on your podcast, if you can see that like, okay, so every 5 times I post on Instagram, my downloads go up a little bit, or I get a share, or I could see that things are being done. If you can see results, then it might be worth doing the math and considering, okay, is it worth me paying someone to help me with this to get the result I know is happening? Then that can be a worthwhile thing to consider. When somebody is offering you views on your shorts and downloads and all of the stuff to get sponsor ready, the words you want to be looking for there are PPC, pay-per-click traffic, because a lot of them are going to send you, a lot of them are the illegitimate ones will just send bot traffic. But if you work with an agency who is using like actual paid traffic campaigns, Google ads, Facebook ads, LinkedIn ads, the same that you could run yourself for your own business, that can be a legitimate business model and actually be a way to get traffic to your show and get downloads. There are a couple of them that are legitimate. Most of them are skirting the edge at best. So, you know, really investigate the mechanism that they're using. They should be able to explain in very technical detail exactly what they're doing and exactly what kind of reporting you're going to get on who's being targeted, how much it's costing, and how long it's taking. For other services, my recommendation is if you're starting with kind of a more bare bones budget, always do it yourself first so that you can have at least enough information to be able to tell whether or not it's working. Because the worst situation you can put yourself in is trusting an expert without having the knowledge to be able to tell whether or not they're actually doing what they say they're going to do. And that might mean, spending a little more time in the social media mines, you know, just doing the stuff that's not really enjoyable so that you can get a sense of, okay, this is what it looks like to work. And that means you're going to be able to evaluate the quality of other people's work. And you know, at a certain point, you may find that your time is more valuable and you're willing to pay someone to take on some of that work. If you've done it yourself enough that you know how it works, that also gives you the option to hire an actual member of your team who can do it instead of an agency, if that's a route that you want to go and you do want to build up your own team to work with. So there's a lot of different ways to explore it. And I think podcasting is still, it's not a new industry anymore. Like the super Wild West days are over, but there's still a lot of people who are trying to make money quite easily without delivering a really quality product. That's the reality in a lot of internet-based businesses. So, be careful as you're making these decisions. And in my opinion, it's never a wrong thing to ask to actually talk to a previous client. I think that's a legitimate ask.
We have not a lot of time, but I got so many more things I want to hit you with. So we're going to try to go as rapid fire as possible. I'm not asking you to talk faster. I'm just asking you to kind of just.
I'll try to not talk too fast. I'm a fast talker by nature, so I'll try to moderate that.
Here. I'm intentionally slowing down so that nobody gets lost in all this stuff. So trust me, I'm with you on that part. All right. So there's definitely a big difference between somebody that's interesting as far as the guest is concerned and somebody that's strategic. I have been really wondering about that myself because I've talked to a lot of interesting people. You check out our show, you see a lot of folks from around the world, around the country. Very interesting. Doesn't mean that they're strategically valuable, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. What makes somebody valuable in that sense of the podcast guests from your experience?
So a strategically valuable podcast interview is going to be someone with whom you could have an ongoing business relationship of some kind. That might be somebody who you are able to co-promote things with. Maybe, you share each other's episodes or you connect with each other and promote each other's stuff on social media. Maybe you're in a position to share business and referrals back and forth. Maybe it's somebody who has access to audiences that you like, and this is the way you're opening the door to, potential podcast swap or other kinds of shared content or collaborative opportunities. You still always want to make good content and have interesting conversations, but by being strategic about who you're talking to in terms of the business goals that you have, you can still create good contact while also sort of building that network of people who's going to help your business in other ways. But the most important thing with this, and the thing that most podcasters do not do correct, is the follow-up. Because having someone as a guest on your podcast is just the beginning. That's step one of the relationship. You have to send a thank you note, follow them on social, get on their email list, follow their stuff. It's a good deal of work. But it's by doing that work that you actually build a real relationship. And there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, this was a great conversation. I would love to have a more informal chat. Could we have another call in a couple of weeks? You can do that at the end of your episode and really build that relationship forward. So I think that's one is, yes, be a little strategic in who you're talking to, but really do the follow-up because that's the big one that most people don't do.
Yeah, I definitely do that. I guess it's just if people are quote unquote too busy to follow up because they're big time, So that does happen a lot. But we'll just keep moving on that one. When we look at, I think I'll avoid the metrics. What would you say if you can give us a blanket look at a podcast and say, okay, this podcast by itself can make money? What does that podcast look like?
Ooh, well, the editing is going to be good. So that means it's going to be, the sound quality is going to be great. If it's in video, it's going to be fairly sharp. It's going to be decently edited. The topic for a show that's going to make money, it's got to be sticky. And so a sticky topic or a sticky concept is one that's really easy for people to remember, and it's really easy for people to talk about. So there's this one podcast I really listen to, and I recommend it all the time. It's one of my favorites. It's called Sawbones, A Marital Tour of Misguided Medicine. And it's a doctor and her comedian husband talking about medical history. Delightful. And you want to have something, a topic that is, or a concept for the show that's kind of repeatable and that people are going to be interested in. So I sometimes call this exactly the same, but a little different. And so that's where you've got a show, and you're going to talk to people about kind of the same basic thing for every episode. You're going to talk to different people and maybe explore different things about it, but the root of it is the same. You've got one clear purpose, and that the type of audience who's going to be really they're into that purpose, and they will listen to 150 episodes that are basically the same, but with different people. That's the kind of show where you get that loyalty, that repeat listening. This is like, oh yes, I would like to hear about everybody's worst first day of school experience, and that thing where you can repeat it again and again and have that, it's mostly the same, but a little different. That's a topic that can often do really well.
Wow. That you have to define sticky for me. Cause that episode title, with that title of that podcast, I'm like, what? Sawbone? What? I thought I'll forget it, but I'm like, what does that even mean? What's happening? So That's what is sticky for those who may have missed it like I did? What does it mean for is that a title for a show or a title for an episode? A topical?
That would be for like a whole show concept. And so it'll be so the whole show, you want it to be sticky, that it's memorable, it's easy to repeat, it's easy to explain. And it's gonna be something that people can tell their friends about really easily.
Very good. I like it. All right, we're gonna go for a couple more questions.
Okay.
I'm having a lot of fun, but I know that I'm running out of time. All right. So one thing that many friends of mine who are likely to catch this on replay for sure are dealing with is the question of consistency.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm a stickler on specific disciplines, so I'm a bit of a harder case. I deal with that from a personal standpoint. Spiritual, et cetera, et cetera. But when you say somebody needs to be consistent, what does that look like? Because some people think if I'm not doing it like Joe Blow doing like with their podcast, I'm not being consistent enough. Or this person says it has to look like this. I know I'm asking one more person, but what does consistency look like, in regards to what you're doing and how you're helping people?
Yeah. So in my view, consistent for a podcast means figuring out what you're going to do in terms of a release schedule, communicating that, and then sticking to it. You got to do what you say you're going to do. And you can say you're going to do different. You can say, I'm going to release one long episode and then a short episode, and I'm going to alternate weeks. And you keep doing that because that's what you said you were going to do. Or you might say, I'm going to do an every Wednesday live stream, and you keep doing that because that's what you said you were going to do. So I think the key to consistency is figuring out what you can reasonably accomplish and then sticking to that. Unless a real emergency comes up, people are human, things happen. But podcast listeners are very loyal until they're not. So if you set the expectation that you're going to have a weekly show and then you don't give them a weekly show, there's other podcasts to listen to. There's lots of them. It's easy. So you really got to kind of deliver on the promise that you made with your podcast and with your release schedule. It doesn't mean you can never change anything. But consistency I think it just means kind of picking something and sticking to it for the length of time that you say you're going to stick to it for.
I love it. All right. Final question, not really a question. I usually end the show with a question. This show, because of our format, what we're doing today, I'm not going to do about. I'm have an ask for you. It's kind of heavy-handed. I'm asking you live on the air, but we can talk about it after we get off. I'd love for you to put my podcast on trial, so to speak.
Ooh.
Okay. So that's not going to happen here while we're on the air. We don't have enough time for that kind of lengthy trial. Deliberation and a whole bunch of evidence. It's a long one, but I would put my podcast on trial. I love to see your overall view of how it is. I have 2 shows, so you can factor in both or how you want to do that. So I want to put my podcast out there. I don't know why I'm doing that. That makes me nervous just by even thinking about it, but I felt like I need to do that. So that's what I'm going to do today. So you can diagnose everything we do. We can talk about it offline, connect offline. Yeah. See how it looks. And I'll use some of that data to try to help out our friends who are constantly barrage me with questions about stuff like this. So I use myself as a guinea pig to hopefully help out my friends so they understand how to audit things on their shows and everything. But if you don't mind doing that, that'd be great. But thank you, Megan, for being a part of this incredible journey. If you don't mind answering one last final mirror check question for us, our friends that are watching and listening, I want you to speak to them before we end the broadcast. They want to start a business or build a podcast or build a business through their podcast, whichever one applies. Number one next step for them. Give it to them right now, and then we'll go ahead and close the show out. Go ahead.
So number one next step is really think about what you as a business owner, whether that's now or in the future, what your business needs. And then the question is, can my podcast help me do that? Is the podcast a tool that I can use to achieve what I need personally or professionally? If it can, good. That's a good sign that you should get into, you should pursue that and you should experiment with it. And if you find out that the answer is kind of like, oh, no, or I'm not sure, give yourself permission to do something else because that's okay too.
I love it. Thank you for being here, for being a part of this conversation and sharing such wisdom and so many nuggets. I really hope that you don't mind coming back on at a later date. That'd be fantastic to have you back on.
I'd love
thank you
to.
for this time today. Great work. Thank you. All right, so you guys that are watching, listen today. If you have a podcast or a business podcast, you have a business and you want your podcast to help boost that business, or you've been thinking about starting something, don't just ask yourself, how do I get more listeners? That's low-hanging fruit. Ask yourself this instead. What do I want this podcast to do for my business? Share this episode with another podcaster, content creator, entrepreneur, coach, consultant who needs to hear the distinction. You can find Megan and all her work at onestonecreative.net. The link is in the comments and in the show notes, onestonecreative, one word, .net/report. You can find her work there. You can connect with her. Barrage her with more questions like you barrage me with. She's more adept to answer those than I am. And of course, if you don't mind helping us out on our YouTube channel, youtube.com @TheyCallMeMrU, MISTAYU. We love your following there and your support, all the work that we're doing there. Listen to our podcast, wherever you enjoy your podcast from. And don't forget, we always say at the end of all of our shows, the difference between who you are and who you could be is found in what you do every single day. That's consistency. We'll see you next time. That's Megan Dougherty. I'm Mr. U. Have a great day. Thanks for watching and listening.